This is the Sustainable Goat Podcast.
We look to nature for how we should interrelate to the world. All the answers are within nature if we take the time to listen.
But what we have to find is a reasonable way how to handle plastic.
You know, consumers expect more. They're expecting brands to be more sustainable. They're choosing sustainable brands.
These are the stories and ideas from those that will define a generation. I'm your host, Steve Cassinem, and this is our planet in focus. Well, Alex, I'm excited to have you on the podcast. Like, we've had some really cool conversations already, and more for me, it's a cool opportunity just to dive deeper on everything you're working on. Tell me a little bit about your background, just where you're originally from and how'd you kind of end up at Blue Strike?
Yeah, Steve, thank you for having me. And I appreciate the conversations and relationship that we've built. And I appreciate you having the platform you do and pushing sustainability forward with a bunch of different tentacles, because that's what sustainability is. It's building a platform foundation for folks to understand where they fit in, because everyone fits in. My history, I grew up in around Madison, Wisconsin. I decided that it was far too cold to spend the rest of my life there when I was old enough to make my own decisions. So I applied to a couple schools with environmental focused schools within the universities, University of Arizona and Arizona State. And I chose ASU because of the School of Sustainability. I was like, there is this awesome opportunity out there. I know nothing. The only thing I know is that this is what I want to pursue. I don't know what this means. I don't know what this looks like. So applied, got in, and eventually got into the School of Sustainability, where the very first impression I had at the School of Sustainability, I think, was really symbolic of what the school is. You know, you do that orientation, you go to school, you go on the campus in the summer to get a feel of what it looks like. And I was the only person in the group in the School of Sustainability. So it was a group of, 40, 50 people, whatever it is. And everybody did their break off, a dozen kids going to the business school. And it's like, okay, gets whittled down and I'm there alone. I'm left. And then I get picked up by one of the professors, takes me on a golf cart tour of the campus. His name is Colin Tatro. He works for Ernst & Young now in their sustainability environmental services division. It quickly became what I consider my mentor and shaped my impression, my experience at ASU. And I had no idea going in to do just that first tour and getting a look around the campus that I would soon meet the person that I consider to be, like I said, the biggest impression and the biggest reason how I process sustainability as a business vehicle in the practical application. So I was thoroughly lucky to be kind of taken under the wing by one of the titans in sustainability and business. And that led me to working on awesome projects at school. I worked on the Final Four, which was the first, I want to articulate this correctly. It was the first Council for Responsible Sport Evergreen certified event, I believe, in its first attempt. And if we figure that out later, what that sounds like. But basically, the Final Four is incredibly hard to operate with through the lens of sustainability. It's a traveling circus, much like the projects that I now work on the PGA Tour and in other landscapes and sports. But to pick up and just figure out how the NCAA, and it's not even the NCAA for those who don't know, on Final Four, Super Bowls, what college football title games, what those look like, is local organizing committees kind of figure out how to run these shows. And sustainability is pretty much an afterthought outside of the organizations that I mentioned. So to pick that up from scratch and deliver a Council for Responsible Sport certification is remarkable, but then to do it at the highest level is crazy. And to be part of that, a very small part of it, because there are hundreds of people that make, thousands of people that make that possible. But to sit in on meetings with utility companies and corporate partners and understand where sustainability fit in, that was an awesome moment for me to be part of. And then from there, I worked with the Arizona Diamondbacks, and what I consider an internship that was kind of a third sustainability, had three different parts to it: sustainability, youth academy, so all of the youth baseball, softball camps, which in its own right is absolutely sustainability, because it's the sustainability of the sport. It's keeping folks interested in getting kids from all different backgrounds to engage with, obviously, a major league club, but also the skills and fundamentals of baseball. And sports is why I'm here and why so many of us are here in the path we're on, and that ties in pretty easily. But then the other part of that internship was the fundraising by selling all of the game used memorabilia. So it was a really awesome application into sports, with me kind of championing the third of that program that I loved, which was sustainability, piloting a food waste capture in Phoenix, and the summer sucks. It's 110 degrees and it just sits out there and gets serviced every 3 weeks. So when I had to go and pull out contamination of concessionaires, you picture that at a ballpark. You've got a ballpark that seats 45,000. What the prep looks like and what all that engagement looks like to go concession stand by concession stand and make sure that everyone is using a food waste cart correctly. And then when they're not, to go out and pick out all of the contaminants with just either your hands or a litter picker out of a 30-yard food waste, probably 20-yard food waste bin. In the summer in Phoenix, it's not the sexiest, but that's what sports and sustainability is. It's engagement, and it's buttoning up all this programming that kind of goes unnoticed. So I like to give everyone a forewarning who's involved or wants to get involved in sports and sustainability, and kind of let them know the sex appeal loses its luster pretty quickly, and you have to have a heart for what you're doing, and you've really got to be interested. And you've got to be doing this for yourself, and when you're doing it for yourself, you're doing it for everyone who's come before you and is coming after you. And then after that, I started with Blue Strike Environmental, and that's been already 5 years, and worked on dozens of PGA Tour events, marathons, road races, concerts, festivals to implement sustainability programming, which I know we'll talk about a little bit further, but that's my background and my kind of on-ramp to sustainability.
Well, and I think we kind of bonded over the fact that we both went to ASU. And I think what's so interesting about that school is you're kind of in this position where you're in the middle of the desert. It's really, really hot in the summertime. You have lack of water, yet you have a school of sustainability, which is funny. It was just starting to get set up when I was there, but to see the progress that this program has had, and also just like the progressive mindset of a university, kind of say, hey, for our university to survive, we need to start thinking differently, but we also need to give the tools to the next generation. Why did you choose that as a major? Because I mean, there are a bunch of majors at ASU. You can do a bunch of different things. Mm-hmm. What brought you to that major? Because I think part of the process of sustainability is really the next generation and the ability of understanding how you can attack sustainability in a very specific and impactful way. What kind of drew you to it originally?
Yeah, and I will say a disclaimer for those who think ASU does have a bad reputation. ASU is the absolute school. You make of it what you want. There's a group, there's a club, there's a school for you. It's a 70,000 person campus and online student body. So whatever you want is out there for you. And I don't say that to canvass for ASU, but I do say it as I hope folks get an understanding of really what the offerings of that school has. Yeah, I'd say why I chose sustainability is because I knew it was a vehicle for business. And I knew it was an application that didn't really sit in my mind like a 9 to 5. It didn't have the structure. It has a foundation, but it has a foundation that absorbs kind of the best and distills the best out of all of the applications that are, for me, sports adjacent or business adjacent. The book is still being written on sustainability, and I have a huge opportunity, and I don't take that for granted each day, that we are writing the book on sustainability and what that looks like. How many other industries do you get an opportunity to do that? And this is the other thing I love is the feedback. It's like, it's so collaborative. This is kind of anecdotal, but a thing that I just loved about ASU is coming from suburban Madison. It's not the most diverse place. And then going to ASU in a very group and organizationally thought out program where you're doing a lot of group projects. You're getting a lot of collaboration. I loved working with people who were from different backgrounds and thinking, why do you think this way? And well, it's teamwork. It literally is the epitome of teamwork. I love that part about sustainability. And I don't know, it's so cliche to say, don't fit in a box or anything, but nobody really fits in a box. And that's what's so great about sustainability is it brings the best out of you. And of course, I didn't know that all that was going to happen. Those are all positive externalities. But like I said, it was really appealing to be knowing that I could apply something I was interested in, which was sustainability, but to business and kind of an opportunity and a window that I knew would not come along again or wouldn't have another opportunity to do.
Yeah, I think we're living through this incredible time of innovation and thought process and not knowing necessarily what the right decision is in the moment, just doing the best that we can. But I think, as you said, it's kind of that discovery process. The book isn't written yet. We are writing it, what will work and what won't work. And I think when we look back on 30, 40 years down the road, what were those decisions that had the biggest impact? And for me, what's particularly fascinating about what you do is the focus on sport as it overlaps into sustainability, because I think the power of sport is, it's powerful. It's one of those things where you get crowds of people who probably would never have a conversation, and they're all wearing the same jersey and they're all rooting for the same team. And it's when that happens, you almost have this community that's naturally formed. And what I like about what you said about is it's not the sexy work. You're picking litter out of food waste bins, where was that realization for you of, hold on, this isn't sexy, but how can we shift this to more people to adopt it? Because I think at a certain point, people aren't excited to adopt it. They're kind of like, ooh, I don't know about that because I don't want to pick litter out of a food waste bin.
Yeah. I mean, let me try to get the best answer to this, or at least an answer that can relate. I mean, I'm doing the work that I think is important. I'm doing the work that I think is credible and that can be translatable. I love that no matter what I'm doing, if it's literally working to make sure recycling on course makes sense, it's working with all the people that are in that community and then giving the existing operation of sustainability a platform to tell that story. That's the best thing to me. And I hope I'm answering your question to a sufficient degree here, but it's the relationships. There's so many people that are already trying to accelerate sustainability. And for me to use the platform of an event, or it to be that funnel that says, okay, everyone come here and let's tell this story through the tournament, through the game, through the concert, through the festival. That's the reason why the kind of sex appeal never wears off. It's because those relationships should be happening. And to be the one to bring the folks together and to use the platform of sports or events to tell the sustainability story and create it in a tangible way, that will never lose its luster to me. Because as soon as the event stops, you can sell a skybox at a PGA Tour event, but that's only good for 4 days. You can operate a sustainability program and that will outlive all of us. That will never wear off for me.
Well, and I think part of that too is that the impact that an event actually has on a space. I mean, I think most of the time when we go to a sporting event, we're traveling in our own vehicle. We show up, we go to the event, we go back, we do the best we can of, hey, put that in recycle and do that. But I think when you zoom out, you see that there are literally thousands of people, tens of thousands of people all congregating and then leaving. And I think one of the fascinating things when I was a kid was like, I was always confused as to how the press conference after a game, the stands are empty so quickly. and then all of a sudden the whole stadium's empty. Where do you kind of see that the growth of the waste and then the accumulation of it and then the analyzation of it afterwards? I mean, is that kind of a cyclical thing, or can you guys kind of expect that?
Are you talking just in the volume or like the purchasing the products we're seeing?
All of that. I mean, you kind of see this like wave of suddenly all this stuff happens and it goes. I mean, I think if you think about if you had one person at a time and you say, hey, this goes in here, I think you can kind of do that. But suddenly when you have 100 people who are trying to get to their seat in time, how do you almost herd that mindset and educate?
Yeah, that education is really tough. And I can't speak as much to the built venue environment. We've worked on the behind the scenes, the back of house, and that's how you remedy those. Literally talking, like, for example, a few months ago, Blue Strike was fortunate enough to work with Green Sports Alliance and the College Football Playoff to sort 70 tons of waste that came from the national title game. So just exactly what you're talking, those folks flocking in from whether that's Atlanta, Georgia area for University of Georgia or the DFW Metroplex for TCU, all of those folks are going to LA for the sole purpose of viewing a game. Sustainability is not top of mind. So I guess at this moment, it is something of a mitigation effort on the back end to know these folks are having a good time. Yes, we'll have messaging during the game that will say, it's important to please use recycling, but that really doesn't matter unless the purchasing is up to snuff beforehand. So right now, I would say, especially at like the built environment level, we're at a mitigation level. So we can then create a programming like back of house sorting to literally hand sort for 24 hours a day for the 2 days post the event, but then for 16, 18 hours for a week post the event to sort through every single bag of waste and ensuring that food goes in food waste, aluminum goes in aluminum, cardboard, paper, plastics are going in recycling, and all the landfill items, which is really small. It's a small amount of landfill items that are going into landfill. But to making sure that that's separated, that's the maintenance phase we're at right now. And then hopefully with those programs that we've built and we are creating, that's where the storytelling opportunity comes in the future. And that's where the video of folks literally sorting waste shows, that's when you can put that on the Jumbotron next year and you can say, look at what this is. These are the efforts behind the scenes. Help us out by just separating your waste. But until all the stakeholders are aligned, it's a big hill to climb. And that's why I say we're kind of at a maintenance or mitigation phase, especially at special events. But then when you're talking, like on the PGA Tour where I do most of my clients are PGA Tour events, I would say it's a little bit easier on an outdoor event because folks know inherently just gravitate to the nearest receptacle. Then it's up to us to make sure we have the right signage. And we still do back of house waste sorting to source out some of the food waste that's caught in or some of those elements. But kind of looking at it from the special event to the built infrastructure and built environment organizations like the NFL or MLB or NBA, they've definitely got a taller hill to climb when you're dealing with an arena event.
Yeah. What's kind of the biggest impact, do you think, of it? Is it the concessions? Is it the actual food waste? Like, what's kind of the biggest impact when you look at events as a whole? Because I think that's kind of the thing to balance out, is that awareness. I think you can tell people, again, you can tell them recycle, but until you don't see how much the mound is, I don't think there's a real realization of what's actually happening. So yeah, what's kind of the biggest impactful side of the waste side?
I'll give you two answers. The one that takes the least effort is talk to your waste haulers. Ask them where these materials are going. Because if you're doing everything right on the front end, you're putting in the sweat equity to make sure materials are separated, but then you call up your waste hauler and they say, yeah, we're actually not sending that to a material recovery facility, you're kind of SOL. And that is a huge downer to put. So I would say cover your bases internally, make sure you've got the correct waste hauler who can actually execute a recycling, or same for food waste. And then understand what goes into that. Do you have to separate glass? Do you have to separate aluminum? Because we're pretty fortunate in the US, and we haven't worked a ton with international events, but when we have, it's like we're dealing with up to 8 or 12 separated streams for recycling. So we're almost going to shoot ourselves in the foot in the US with building these mega facilities to separate waste when the materials we're not even sending them are able to be commodities anymore. So we've got to be a bit more respectful in understanding what we're putting into the waste stream, or recycling stream for that matter. But that starts with talking with your waste haulers. The kind of the more cumbersome effort level, I would say that answer is purchasing and communication. I understand it's really hard to go around to each vendor and have a conversation that this is what the waste stream looks like, and this is what a pre-event, a during event, and a post-event waste stream looks like. And then to execute that, because at the end of the day, all events want to do is put a safe event together that brings people together for the reason that they're congregating. Sustainability is an externality. So having somebody on your team, on your staff, to be able to play that role in that kind of, not the green police, that's never going to win you anything, being the green police, but being a friend and an ally and articulating how correct purchasing can save them money, whether that's bulk condiments or purchasing items that folks can take back to a concession stand and get $2 off because I brought back my steel cup. Something like that to build a little bit of engagement, loyalty, and then of course a sponsorship opportunity out of that with purchasing is the key. So yeah, purchasing and engagement when it gets down to a little bit more work, but then on that really streamline opportunity is just have conversations with your waste hauler.
And where I feel like you guys fall specifically in the picture is almost that go-between of the consumer and the back-end side. Because what I'm hearing a lot of is that the back-end side is where the real work is done. I mean, I think a lot of people would know that if they look at it a little bit deeper, but I think there's an inherent responsibility on the back end to kind of do better. But if the infrastructure is not there, no matter what the consumer side does, nothing's going to be impactful. And then I think you almost lose that momentum. If someone's like, yeah, I'm doing a good thing, you want that reward system, that $2 back, that something to kind of train the mind that it's literally just a lifestyle shift that's not that difficult, but you got support across the board. I mean, is that from the back end side, is there, for lack of a better term, is there buy-in from kind of all the brands of going, hey, we got to do this? Or do you kind of find there's some fight back of like, well, this is going to be a really expensive thing to overhaul and do, and this is a whole new system? And where do you kind of find that fit?
Yeah, I'd say resistance is met across the spectrum of I'm all in or cool, but how much is it going to cost me? There's certainly a degree of where everyone falls in. I would say in general, most folks are on board. And when I'm considering kind of the back of the house operations, I'm thinking as a group together, operations partners or vendors, as most kind of staff adjacent or event adjacent operators would be considered. We all want one thing to go well, and that's the event. So I would just say timing and having enough runway for that conversation. And anytime that we are working with a client, it's not about being the green place. It's not about saying, I really need you to separate wood because of X, Y, Z. I want to help you increase our event's waste diversion. Here are the efforts, and here's how I'm going to support you on this. So it's easy for you to use. Literally creating signs, simple things like that. but then making sure that you're there to help them dispose, help them unload. If they've got a forklift up there and they need some stuff moved around in the dumpster, just being present, being seen, and being seen as a cooperator and not a path interrupter, because that's the key to all of this. And then when it gets down to, like we've talked about a little bit, concession purchasing, and that is probably where the biggest cost difference comes in when folks are, I make a lot of money off of water, let's say. Okay, well, there are ways to mitigate that water cost or create new opportunities, like I said, through a sponsorship. And those are the solutions that we have to come with, or else our efforts are going to fall on deaf ears. If we cannot attach a sponsorship to refillable water stations, no concessionaire, no event is going to move toward reusable water stations. So we've got to get that branded cup out there. We've got to make sure that if we can redeem all of the aluminum for 10 cents per bottle, well, that turns out to be a heck of a lot of money at the end of a 100,000 person attended event, and all of the beer, the water, etc., that is consumed and then disposed of. So it's finding ways to capture rebates, create ROI. Anytime you can attach the carrot, like you said, to the consumer aspect, anytime you can do that on the back end, that's certainly going to drive interest. But then it's up to us to make sure that we're arming folks with the ability to be involved in those conversations when they go out and have those. So
I think that's really interesting from the sponsorship standpoint too, of like, I think most of the time when you go to an event, you expect the sponsor to be on the court, on the wall, on the jersey, on the, whatever, but maybe you think the manufacturer's just the cup. That's it. But presenting an opportunity for other brands that may not be in the sustainability space, say, hey, we're supporting this. I think that's a huge opportunity, because you're making brand alignment, but you're also making that impact. You're also educating people in the community, and you're getting measurable brand awareness realistically. Because I think one of the harder things is you can put your logo out on left field, but you don't know how many thousands of people are actually looking at that versus the other one that's next to it. And I think you could say we sold this many cups. Now you actually have a measurable impact of impressions. And I think that's super valuable. And I don't think that was really a thought of solution until you had a problem of waste.
Yeah, definitely. And you're finding, organizations doing awesome efforts like Anheuser-Busch and their National Recycling League, I believe it's called in Major League Baseball, and trying to roll that out throughout. It's creating all of these brands are on their own journey with sustainability. Majority of events are on their own sustainability journey. So let's tie that together. And that's what we do for our clients. It's simply bringing the right players to the table, monetizing it financially, civically, leaving a better legacy. And yeah, you're right. You look at no way to quantify the impressions when you're looking at an outfield board or a side panel advertisement. But when you can take something home and remember the experience that you had, and remember that you can attach that to, the Ball aluminum cup sponsored by Anheuser-Busch, that's meaningful. And it's meaningful to the event steps, because anytime a fan takes a cup home, for example, that's keeping it out of the landfill. Of course, we don't know what they're doing with it after it's been taken home, but little steps like that to make sustainability not seem like it has to be labeled sustainability is such a key. And then, of course, like I said, it's marrying that with all of the efforts that are already going on. You look at any Fortune 500 company, they've all got ESG reports out there. The waves are beginning to ripple of, if I'm going to sponsor your event, it's time for you to step up and make sure that my dollars are not just going into an event where we're diverting 3% of waste. Like, you've got to have a plan if you want our sponsorship dollars. This is no longer something that, you can kind of have a conversation your way out of including sustainability. Brands are demanding this because that's the way they operate now.
Yeah. And I think from a media standpoint, I mean, for me, it's so cool to be able to peek behind the curtain, if you will. Because when you're doing media, you get literal access to everything, and you get to see behind the scenes of literally everything. And I think you look at everything in a new light. What was that like for you when you go from being a sports fan and kind of dipping your toe into sustainability, and now suddenly you're heavily involved in it? You are seeing behind the scenes. You're seeing from the brand side, the sponsor side, the event side, the consumer side, waste side. Has that changed your picture of what you kind of thought sustainability was?
I don't know if it's changed my kind of vision or imagination or picture of what sustainability was, because I always knew that sustainability, whether or not folks actually attach the term sustainability to an act or a purchase, I always knew that superseded in its more practicality and functionality. I always knew that would rear its head in some way, positively or negatively. So I don't know if it's changed so much. It's certainly the magnitude is always increasing. I think that's kind of the most, not necessarily shocking thing, but the most kind of like grounding thing to understand is anytime we think we've I'll use the word patched a problem because there's always going to be something new. Just like any other industry, the recycling market, let's say for ease, or travel market for when we're looking at carbon emissions, they're just markets at the end of the day. They're always evolving. So do we. We have to evolve as an organization, or just going to be stuck in people wondering, well, okay, what's the actual remedy here? So I guess the constant changes in the market that sustainability is involved with, that's the biggest thing that's shocked me. I remember literally a week after I started with Blue Strike, that was when overseas recycling markets said we're no longer accepting a bulk of plastics. So that was a huge thing to try to wrap my head around, going into an organization who has spent 10 years, a dozen years working on executing Cal Recycle grants, which for those, probably not many people do know. That's Cal Recycle, which is California's local government body in executing recycling programming. We operated those grants and carried out recycling at events and in agricultural communities like the Salinas Valley and Central Valley of California. It's like, so we just built a business on recycling, and now recycling's changed. So that's the biggest way the picture has changed. And I mean, our company's morphed too. When I started, we had really just one division, which was sustainable events. Now, our biggest and most profitable division is climate action planning. It's every single, like I was just saying about those Fortune 500 organizations, every single city, state, county, public entity has to have a path to carbon neutrality. So the market continues to evolve, and sustainability, the word in and of itself, has continued to evolve. So if you as an organization are not acknowledging that and being ready to adapt, you're going to be left behind. So it's, yeah, that would be my answers, I guess, to kind of how the picture has changed.
Yeah. I also think that when you look at that infrastructure that businesses have to kind of fit into now, to me, it's just more efficient. Like you look at the resiliency, the circularity, and the community around this thought process, it's really just about being more efficient day to day. If you can take your waste and turn that into energy, if you can take an entire event and not leave a footprint, it makes it easier for you to have the event the next year. I just think it eases that and removes that friction of some of those everyday steps that we're forced to kind of go into. I mean, you look at our movement into plastic over decades, it was out of convenience. And at the time it was kind of like, well, this is the best way to do it because we can keep food longer, which is great. And you don't really know until 30, 40 years down the road, like, ooh, we have a waste problem now. And I think, you move back to going to glass now, we're finding that some of these decisions that we made back in the day are actually good ones. We just never provided that infrastructural side of it. For you on the sporting side, what's kind of been the most exciting events that you've been able to work on, or either have the biggest impact on, or really see in a different way how that organization works?
Yeah, I mean, I guess this would be my answer, and it's how the PGA Tour operates. I don't know what percentage of listening or other audience would understand the PGA is different from the PGA Tour. So the PGA Tour, all of their events, they're nonprofits. I think in the way that they operate, and really the most unique aspect to the PGA Tour is everything that they do, every city they go into is literally to impact the community for the better. So, when we're working with the, kind of our home event, the AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am, and that sustainability program that we've built over 12 years and certified with GEO 3 times, hopefully a fourth now, and all of the awesome programming we've done. Well, guess what? In addition to the programming we do on the back end and the money that we raise for organizations through our community green team, the tournament itself is raising millions of dollars for local organizations, nonprofits in the Tri-County area, which they would not have any idea what golf is if the Pro-Am didn't exist. They would not have any degree of the funding that these agricultural organizations have, that introducing youth to technology, all of these little organizations that are kind of mom and pop nonprofits, they're able to survive with the funding and by being benefactors of PGA Tour events. And you pick any tour spot on the map, and you can know that when a tour event is there, they're benefiting a hospital, local environmental organizations, youth education, whatever it is. Again, that's sustainability, creating a legacy to keep nonprofit organizations keep impacting their communities. And that goes beyond waste, that goes beyond carbon emissions. And that social inequalities and social sustainability is another kind of task to tackle and to keep organizations up and running who are benefiting the community when we don't even think about that. So I would say that's the biggest thing that's opened my eyes. And I would encourage anyone who's listening to look up their local PGA Tour event and look at the organizations that those tour stops economically impact and see how you can get involved, because that is so different than a for-profit sport. And of course, folks are making their money on through golf. That's not what I'm saying here, that's entirely a non-profit endeavor. But when you contrast that against the NFL or MLB or NBA, those are all for-profit organizations. And yes, they have great community programs, but that's not the reason they exist the way the tour exists to benefit the local communities.
That's fascinating, because I mean, I've been a golfer my entire life, and you watch PGA Tour and it's just an event, and you see every once in a while a little shout out. They'll have somebody on TV who's kind of like, hey, yeah, we're representative of the hospital, and here's the impact and the help that it's done. And in all honesty, I used to just think, well, that's just like somebody they wanted to say, hey, let's help you out. But I actually didn't know that PGA Tour specifically was nonprofit events. That's fascinating. Why don't they really talk about that more? Because I think, in the bigger picture of what, an ESG is, it really is about the societal side of that. It's providing equitable education. It's providing access to opportunities that I think don't come along every year. You could just have this one event every year, and it provides such a great opportunity that can kickstart truly somebody's dream coming true. And I think that they don't really talk about that much. Why is that?
I don't know if I can't distill that answer to. I would say they absolutely do, but they may not do it in the most conventional channels. I think that's kind of the hardest part of a traveling circus that is the PGA Tour, for example, is it's this week, it's on to the next. You don't get a lot of time for reflection and looking back necessarily, for better or for worse, especially when, let's say, the Masters, where that's a more traditional golf audience. Therefore, that product on television, or probably at the course, I've never been to Augusta, but the television product is certainly more geared toward a traditional golf audience and golf engagement. I would say that some of the less watched and maybe less foot trafficked events highlight more of the local engagement and the local storytelling a little bit better. But again, they're not in the big media markets. So I don't know. I think the best thing the tour has done recently is developed their own department of sustainability to tell that story through comms. And they do a really good job with a written segment called Beyond the Ropes that I would encourage everyone to check out. And so it's like these channels are out there, but they're not amplified to the degree that an advertisement is. And that's probably just dictated by dollars, just as everything else is, which is, in general, sustainability, social, environmental, or otherwise, we try to avoid the digging that has to be done to get to the answer or to find the light at the end of the tunnel. So I guess that's a learning experience for me to take back, and because I am in this bubble of events. So I love that you've given me that feedback to think about and understand how can I help my clients and otherwise tell the story of the good that they're already doing. I think that's the biggest thing about sustainability. And I'll say it, I say it to just about anyone before I start working with them. I say, not here to highlight what's going on wrong. I'm not here to tell you what we need to do better. I'm here to celebrate what you're already doing well and what the opportunities are that exist around sustainability and who we can engage and how we can impact further. So I don't know how many organizations themselves, again, not just on the PGA Tour, but events, all across events, how many of them are looking and reflecting for the positive? Because that's the biggest thing. If anyone walks away from this, and I don't know what the vibe is when people hear sustainability and if it's kind of a downer for them, but I would absolutely encourage them to think, what are the actions I'm already taking that are positive? Because there's definitely going to be more than you're giving yourself credit for. And that's certainly true in events.
That's such a good way of looking at it, because I think one of the approaches that I think GOAT takes is that we want to root everything around this conversation in positivity. It's not doomsday. It's not you must do this, you have to do that. It's no, this is an opportunity, and in a good way. And here are the people that are doing incredible things along the way. And I think when you humanize that and you say, hey, these are people who are making choices that are very much like you and I, and it's just, a simple shift that you can make, I think that it almost feeds on itself in a really positive way. And especially when you look at events, when one event chooses to do something differently and ends up being very successful at that mission, it almost sets the new standard of, hey, every event should be done this way. What's kind of an event right now that you think is super progressive in the sense of the education, the communication, the actual impact, the waste? What's kind of an event that you've worked on or worked with, or Blue Strike's worked with, that's that's kind of really in that progressive nature?
Yeah, I would say as far as the progressive nature, a newer client of ours, it's, perhaps this is because this is now my home, but the Farmers Insurance Open in La Jolla, San Diego. I would say the opportunities of sustainability in San Diego it's interesting because this is it's a progressive state. It's to a degree a progressive city, but I think it's a city that likes to make sure they're buttoned up before they communicate a little bit more. And that's something that I've, moving from Monterey, where Blue Strike is based, to San Diego, kind of understood and been able to make a better relationship, and the best relationship that I've had with the city. This is a place where the city is involved in events. There's environmental compliance. And again, I don't take it as if the Green Police is coming out when I engage with them, but having that feedback system within the city, kind of having this framework, this structure built around sustainable events, having an example of what they expect to execute, that's huge. That's key for me to operate within, because so often, whether it's permitting for parking or otherwise, you feel like you're kind of fighting against the city. I don't feel like I'm fighting against the city in San Diego. I feel like they very much want the best, and they want to ensure that events are just looked at through the lens of sustainability. That compounded by the awesome additions that we've created this year, creating a sorting team with local nonprofits. So getting the Sierra Club and a local environmental organization a little bit up the coast near Carlsbad to go in and help us sort all of the waste coming off the course. And then compounding that with an existing relationship with a binational nonprofit who takes all of the AstroTurf that can't be upcycled or recycled to Mexico and used for play fields. It's like all of these things that we take for granted in America, like AstroTurf, that's not good enough for our youth to use. It's like, well, guess what? They think it's perfectly okay to use it in replacement of pavement, concrete, to be a sport turf across the border, and they make the most out of it. So I love celebrating that program and knowing that we're keeping 25 tons of material out of the landfill, and they're using it, Tijuana and a little bit south, to put down over concrete and asphalt to make sure that the kids have just not the best playing surface, but it's a better playing surface than running around playgrounds of asphalt. So finding that repurposing is awesome. And then just the buy-in from the tournament office. I don't know if I've had a better buy-in from the tournament office and more engagement of saying, we trust you, run with this. And maybe that's because I have that relationship to build, and we can really, collaborate and bounce off of one another. And this is not to say it's not this way at other events and with other clients, but really being treated as an equal at an event and not just a vendor is a huge aspect to moving programming forward. And I think even if an event or a team or an organization has a sustainability expert in-house or sustainability position in-house, I don't know that they're always viewed as an asset. I think they're viewed more as compliance. And that's more of the trend now with our clients, is we are viewed as an asset, not viewed as compliance or liability. So I would say I'm thrilled with the progress we've made at Farmers Insurance Open. And really 1 year of programming, which has just been 8 months or so, we've doubled the waste diversion. We've gotten nonprofits involved. We're built a great relationship with the city, and I can safely say leading at least temporary and special event sustainability in San Diego. And that's something, of course, that I'm proud to hang my hat on, but our clients are too, and the city is too. They want to celebrate this. Everybody's out here to push sustainability forward.
Well, and how is that for you? Because I mean, you live there. You're contributing to your own hometown. Does that change at all? I mean, I know what you do at each event is the same, but does it feel a little bit different that it's like actually your home versus not?
Yes and no. I mean, it's yes from the respective, I'm building relationships with nonprofits and community organizations where the volunteers, the texting and calling, and it's more of like a free-flowing engagement level. But I say no because at the same time, we're doing this all over the place. When we go, whether it's Texas or Iowa or Connecticut or Florida, it's like we're helping organizations and bringing nonprofits to engage with an event in a new light that they never thought that they could have in the first place. I build those relationships everywhere, and that's what keeps me coming back to doing this job, is those relationships and making friendships with people who are just so grateful to be brought into an event so then they can flourish and they can tell their message. So that's more of an internal thing. I don't take it with more magnitude, but it certainly is. It certainly is nice to know you're doing it in a place where you can see the results, and then you've got more conversation started because those conversations, they're more lubricated. There's more continuity of the conversations and the folks that you're engaged with. So yeah, I guess I can see the difference there a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. And I think One of the important parts of it, I mean, you mentioned it, is the idea of circularity, taking AstroTurf and putting it to use if it can't be recycled or upcycled. And I think even as GOAT develops as a brand, we're noticing that the three things that I think that we focus on in everything that we do, whether it's a company, a person, a story, whatever it is, we base it in intentionality, circularity, and community. And if you always kind of think with those three pillars, you're able to really rationalize every decision that you almost make. And you've mentioned community multiple times, that you're able to band together this incredible community that actually helps one another. You have the intentionality of like, hey, we're going to go after this event in a very intentional way, and here's what we're going to do. And then the circularity conversation of, this is a global thing. It's not necessarily just a communal thing that's local. It's a global community. And so the more you can think circularly, the more impact that you can have. I mean, is that something that events are starting to become more open to, this idea of, well, maybe there's something outside of this little bubble of just this event that comes in? Because I think that's being around events, at least from a media standpoint, it really is a bubble. Like, it's almost like the world disappears for whatever those days are. And it's like, that is the thing. And then afterwards, you're like, whoa, the world was existing outside of this. Are they starting to think outside that bubble as well?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I say that, I don't mean to say that with like hesitation in my voice, but I think because it comes from so many angles, the answer is yes. But how that lands, again, just like you said, being in that bubble, you're in the bubble for a week, 2 weeks, a month, 2 months. What's the retention within that? So I think that's where it's incumbent upon me to stay front and center with our clients and with the allies that we build in the community, whether that's the city department, it's a county office, somebody saying, giving credence to what we're doing that in the off season and building that relationship in the off season about enhancing the program and knowing that a majority of the work is done in the off season. Just like when you plan out an event, if you're an event operator, majority of the work you're doing is not during event week. Everything should be set. If you're a tour tournament director or operations director, you should be able to walk out there and say, look at the awesome job I've done. Well, that's the same thing with sustainability. We should be going out there and saying, look, we put everybody in the best position to either recycle or be aware of what we're doing, or we're on the path to GEO certification, GEO Golf Environment Organization, which is the international body and standard of golf sustainability. We've put ourselves in the best position to succeed. It's no different than anytime anyone else goes to work and they've put in the work all year long for whatever they're doing, or you go to school and you take a test. It's all about preparation. So I think hitting folks in communication at the right time, that's the most important to create the reception of the messaging and the engagement and the buy-in. So we kind of avoid the crucial conversations and the moving the mountains when it is the bubble, as you say.
Yeah, definitely. And I think from a golf standpoint, you get this cool opportunity where, I mean, I don't know if many people are aware of how golf events work. I mean, there is a Thursday through a Sunday, and you look at basketball and you have a game, but you have these 4 rounds, but you also have the Wednesday round, and you have all the stuff that happens that whole week. It's almost like you have a lot of these opportunities to kind of engage the community and give them opportunities and to show all that hard work that goes on. Because I think a lot of people, maybe a couple months out, they're like, oh, the event's, it's only a few months of planning. It's like, no, the moment the event ends, they're already planning the next year, and they're kind of going into it. I mean, from your standpoint, you've also done a little bit of work on the access to golf and the advising of golf with one of the other episodes we had with Driving the Green. Where do you find that translation between an event and then a local community? Because I think that's also an important translation. It's like you have this event that comes and goes, but golf courses are still there.
Yeah, I think, and thank you for mentioning Driving the Green. We can touch on that in a little bit too. I think the biggest kind of access opportunity to golf and to golf tournaments is, again, something you're not seeing, but it's already being done. Usually every week on the PGA Tour event, you're going to see a local clinic hosted by, either the club pro or some PGA Tour professionals. So it's, again, all these stories are already out there. We kind of need to do a better job of making the stories easier to be digested and not in the face of the audience, but to be equal effort behind the communication, maybe. So it's not understood that these efforts are already being had. The other awesome part about the PGA Tour is most events, 18, 15 and under or so, the kind of like school age kids, they're all free to go to the event. So the actual like restricting of buying a ticket, it's not like, going to a Padres game where I got to spend $120 or whatever to bring my 4-year-old. Well, that limits your entry right there to your attendance. And That's a huge hindrance. And then you're talking about NFL. Okay, 8 home games. Those are going to be way more. Let's bring our kids for free to the PGA Tour event. It's so easy. Again, that's really the reflection of what's the good that's already being done. And restricting access, that's not something the PGA Tour does. It's very easy to get there. Yeah, supervising a child and bringing them, I don't have kids. I don't know that struggle yet. But the on-ramp to golf and the introduction, it's there. And then again, as I mentioned, looking up kind of what your local PGA Tour event does with nonprofits, I'd check out what the First Tee does, because there's probably a collaboration already going on with that tournament. Or even if it doesn't have to be a tour event, it can be local club events. They probably have engagements with First Tee organizations and how they're amplifying golf and in the relationship with youth and golf, especially, youth from parts of the community that may or may not organically be introduced to golf. So the efforts are out there, and that's kind of where it's our responsibility as stewards of a community to, whatever your interest level is, to engage. How can I introduce, whether I'm interested in the environmental side of sustainability or the social side of sustainability, into my niche, into my community group? And then you can absolutely scale that up and look at that. What's the highest representation level, like I said, with the First Tee, or youth getting a clinic with a PGA Tour professional, or free admission into a tournament?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And for you, what's kind of been your favorite part of what you do day to day? I mean, as any job is, there's some parts where you're like, I wish I didn't have to do that, but you know what? We'll do it anyway, because it's part of the bigger goal. But what are the things that kind of give you the most energy day to day in what you do?
Yeah, I've said it a couple of times before, but it's the relationships I build in the communities. It's going to literally visit the landfill and the recycling center, and then learning how they operate, and then in turn bringing them out, giving them a golf cart tour of the event, jumping into dumpsters with them, showing them what materials we're looking at, so we can make sure we've got a plan to keep that out of the landfill. Or I'm getting real feedback from the folks operating diversion centers. This should be replaced. Nothing replaces real feedback with people who are living sustainability day to day in a market. And that can be really simple. That can be environmental nonprofits. That can be, like I said, your local landfill or waste district. That can be whoever's in charge and writing your climate action plan in your city or county. The university nonprofit environmental group. There are so many people out there that want to do good, and they just haven't. It's like there's this perception that you need this like ticket to entry to be involved with sustainability, and you certainly do not. I don't care if you have a degree in sustainability. I don't care what your background is. If you're inherently interested in doing good and understanding that there's a business application of this, it'll go as far as you want it to go. So getting the feedback from everyone around me that operates day to day in a market, and being able to share that, scale that, and celebrate them through an event, that's priceless to me. Mm-hmm. Those relationships will outlive all of us. Whoever comes and works for Blue Strike next, whoever is the next recycling specialist in the city of San Diego, I don't care who those people are, but they're going to understand the magnitude and effort level that went into celebrating the good at an event and celebrating the partnerships. And if that wasn't there, I suppose that's the hardest thing to replace. And that's the thing that I love the most about my job.
I love the way you put that too, because I think people are such a key role in it in the long term. Like each specific person has an impact, but also every role after that has an impact. And I think it's laying that foundation of a mindset. And as you kind of develop as a brand and as a company, I mean, sustainability as a whole, it very much began as a grassroots effort. It was very much a by the people and just, hey, let's go after this. And then eventually the movement became big enough where you had conversation around it. And I think when it reaches a point where you have businesses and events and you have people paying attention, you realize that there's actual business application to it. I think one of my friends, he runs a company that's working on energy grids and everything. And he's been an episode on the podcast. And part of the conversation is centered around, well, this isn't just I want to personally make a better decision. It actually helps even the bottom line for the company. It's just a financial gain. And so why wouldn't you? And then that conversation suddenly shifted it. So it's kind of, I think for some people, it's, how do you frame it in a business perspective? Other people, how do you do it in a social perspective? And then how do you do it from a communal perspective? But I think it's all rooted in not only the person, but the experience of actually seeing it. I mean, for you to say that you've seen it and talking to the people has shaped how you see it. Is there, and I don't know if this exists, is there ways for people beyond like their own time reaching out? Is there a way for them to peek behind the curtain?
Peek behind the curtain at like an event level?
Seeing the waste, getting involved. I mean, is there that type of program really at all? Or is it pretty much if you're with that organization that's doing it, you kind of see it. Because I mean, for me, if I got my hands on something, I understood it. I got it. Whereas if I was just told, I'd be like, well, that's interesting. But would I necessarily take action on it?
That's a really good point. For the specific business avenue that I operate within and that we operate within in events and sports sustainability, I don't know that there's this immediate access. I say that to also say that if anyone's interested, I will absolutely make sure that I can get them to shadow me for a day or whatever that looks like, or join if we have like I said, we call green teams, which that can be handling the waste and recycling on the course. That can be back of house sorting. That can be simply just engaging folks upon entry of what sustainability means at this event. So there are certainly ways that we engage with that, but I don't know what the demand looks like out there. Like there's not a mechanism to, like not an online sign up portal or something to say, I want to engage with sustainability on this event. Is someone else already out there that I can collaborate with? Or I don't know if that exists. I wish it would, but the easiest answer I can give you is any volunteer at an event, or I would say volunteering at an event will give you all of the info you need, but it's not going to be designated for sustainability though.
Yeah.
It's a really good question. Maybe it's like this podcast audience, and it just can grow and it can kind of take its own from there. But I'd be interested to see what the kind of demand is for folks who want to engage with sustainability at an event or even business level. Because one of the things I like to think about is, okay, who are the main stakeholders? All of these, like I said, nonprofits have a board of directors. What are the companies that they're involved with? Because they're not dumb people that are on boards of directors of nonprofits that run PGA Tour events. Like, let's look in the mirror again and reflect, what are the other tentacles that we have that are operating within our community and that we can latch onto? So I'd be interested just to see sponsors, other engagement level. I'd want to reach that. I say that to say I'd want to reach out as far as we can to those involved with events and events adjacent to see who's interested in sustainability and how we can get more hands-on with them. I don't know how we do that.
Yeah. I mean, for me, just thinking about it from an access perspective, you might have somebody who wants to maybe do a career shift into more of a sustainably focused role, or you might have people who maybe would be like, yeah, I'll volunteer, but you have, I think, a certain subset of people that, hey, I want to volunteer for this event. But if you go, hey, as a company, we'll pay you to go on a field trip, essentially, to go to this event and help out or see behind the scenes, you're almost incentivizing that volunteer mindset, but doing the same thing as the people who want to volunteer to go, hey, I want access to this. You're showing them the same picture. And I think it kind of starts to snowball in a sense where they may start looking at their company. They're like, well, I saw this at this event, so why don't we do this? And I just think it continues that mindset of how do we just make this part of the culture of the company, and almost that $2 back for the aluminum cup thing.
Yeah. And I mean, as you're saying that, the things that are coming up in my mind is making sure that the league or the overarching brand is providing that access, that it's possible, because that's one of the best things since the PGA Tour has developed their own sustainability department, is that I can have collaboration with the tour representative in Tour HQ about sustainability and what that means. So I absolutely can bring this back to him and his department and see, like, what does that look like? Where can we do like the, I'm thinking like, my mind goes to all of the student groups that are at colleges, universities that are trying to positively infiltrate sustainability into other aspects. It's like, well, let's figure out how we can do that from the tour level. And then the same, whether that's literally like a week intern or something, not W-E-A-K, but a W-E-E-K, long intern, something like that, where there is an on-ramp for those interested. And it's just as important for someone to get a taste of work they want to do and then find out they don't want to do it as it is to confirm that they want to do it.
Yeah. I mean, the podcast episode just before this, it's with a student at UCLA who's developing Club Zero. And the whole concept is, how do you give Gen Z the tools to be able to engage and explore this world? Because, he's done a lot of surveys on it. And the whole concept is that they know there's actionable things that need to be done. They want to be involved. They just don't know how. And I think that a part of our conversation was backing back to the actual back end organizations kind of empowering the people on the front end to be able to do it. And I just think from an event perspective, it's such a great opportunity to do that, because there isn't a certain inherent excitement around an event, and it ends up being almost like a week-long camp in a way, where you're able to get paid to figure it out or even do it for free. And you're able to get access to things that you weren't normally able to, and you get to learn. Do you like it? Do you not? Where can you fit in that world? And I just think there's such an opportunity, especially with the next generation, but also just for events to play that role, because I think sport in general has a unique role in that it's always at the center of culture. No matter what sport it is, it's at the center of whatever culture that is. And you get this gathering of different backgrounds, mindsets, thought processes, and they're all collectively thinking the same thing at the same time of, hey, we want that strike to go through. We want them to actually make it through the bottom of the ninth to win. But you have this whole other side where I think you have a collective group. And so, I mean, for me, I think watching the iteration of these events, and you're seeing it in a lot of events, you're seeing more conversation around sustainability. You see it in Formula One, you see it in golf, you see it in basketball, football. They're starting to talk about it. And I think as your role, it's so cool to see what Blue Strike is doing behind the scenes. Because do I think that Blue Strike will be ever on the screen? Possibly. But I think it's the important work that needs to be done no matter what. And I think a lot of times it's a thankless job, and specifically what you do, it's very much unseen, but I think the impact is so, so large. How do you guys deal with that in terms of, you have a role as a company, of course, and you guys have a client base, but you guys are very much the behind the scenes. It's to make it frictionless. You may see 30 of Blue Strike people kind of going around, the volunteers and the green team, and people may just think, oh, that's Big Sur Marathon or that's Farmers Insurance Open. How do you guys kind of navigate that as a business? Because part of that business survival, of course, is building a brand and a name. And is it public or is it more behind the scenes that you guys want to be known?
Yeah, I would say I'll answer it in reverse. There's no one thing that we would, I guess, like to be known for. I mean, I'll say I'm not in the credit business. I'm not in business to take credit. I'm in business to help our clients succeed or add a new way of succeeding. So for me, if I do my job well, everything will be taken care of, word of mouth or otherwise. That relationship will precede me. And I think it has this far. And that's why we're successful, and successful to the degree we are. Everyone has an ego to a degree. So to say I'm egoless or something would be ignorant. But I'm not in this for me. I'm in this for my company probably more than I am me. But I'm in this for the communities. I'm in this to be better steward. So I guess it takes a certain kind of mindset to understand that if you want to get recognition, this is not the industry for you. But if you want to build relationships and if you want to find a new value of kind of social currency, then this is for you. And if you want to be creative and if you want to find something that drives you, that is a little bit indirect, but you get to do it your own way and you get feedback in a unique atmosphere, this is for you. I don't really know how because we're seen differently to different folks. Our clients, like for example, San Diego State University, they have no idea that we do sustainable events. All they care is that we help them with their climate action plan, and we put them on a vehicle to get to carbon neutral by, I don't know their date, 2040, 2050, whatever that is. So our clients see us for very, very different things, but there is positive we perpetually elevate our other divisions within our organization because nobody has the suite of services that we do when it comes to sustainability, at least in the United States. Nobody's doing boots on the ground sustainability work, doing sorting teams, meeting the Council for Responsible Sport or GEO certification for our events. And then on kind of the top down, the corporate relationship liaisons, nobody's out there with climate action planning like we are. And that's where our business ultimately, where we want to see it manifest, is where those two meet and those two segments meet. And they meet when the market lets them meet. I'll give you an example, and hopefully this can kind of set the tune for sustainability and events. Up until last year at the Green Sports Alliance Summit, which GSA Green Sports Alliance is kind of the convention, the convening of all the players in sport and event sustainability. So the topic of choice was always waste until 2022. Then all of a sudden, it just switched over, that now the topic is emissions. It's energy consumptions, it's emissions creation, it's emissions mitigation. So that tells you that this industry is pivoting right now to moving toward a new goal. And yes, waste isn't impactful, and we try to limit everything we send to the waste. But the reality is the carbon emissions from transportation, travel, logistics, event logistics, that's the bigger hill to climb. So now we're seeing the industry change and pivot. And guess what? Blue Strike's already positioned to help, because that's what we've been servicing clients on for 5 years in addition to special events. So it's like we come prepared because I don't know that anyone else has kind of a better pulse on the market and better understanding of what it's like to make actionable difference from the top down and bottom up. And I think a lot of other organizations, everyone has their blind spots, but I think a lot of sustainability organizations have their blind spots, whether they're only internal or they're only external. The mix of where we are, where we're going will always keep us on the path that's right. And not too worried about what kind of path we should be on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think by hitting on event logistics, I think that's a very important point. Because, I mean, you look at Formula One as a sport, the actual impact of the vehicles going around a racetrack is extremely low single digit. It's all of the logistics to get them there and to get everyone else there, and then the energy consumption on site. I think that infrastructural impact, people did notice like, ooh, this is significant. I mean, how do we be more responsible about that process? Which is obviously a huge topic and a really, really, really big concept. But I think by continuing that conversation and education, whether it's at the business level or the consumer level or the fan level, I just think it has a ripple effect that begins to start to permeate culture in a way where it suddenly isn't a hard conversation to have. You don't really have to educate people anymore really on waste. It's kind of like, well, if you can recycle it, why don't you? You don't really have to overcome that hurdle anymore. For you, where do you kind of see the future of sustainability going beyond even just the infrastructural carbon impact? Where do you kind of see everything going?
I mean, optimistically, I see everything going. I'd like to see the label of sustainability removed. I'd like to see me not needing to exist in the capacity I do for working. Of course, that's pretty far-fetched because I make a living being that kind of that gap analysis implementer for sustainability on events goals and where they're at. But I'd love for me to not have to exist. Where I really see it going is I see more engagement. You see sustainability, like I said, the label being removed. If you give the international analog of events, in regard to sustainability, looking just at the lens of sustainability, let's talk about water on a course, for example. I talk with counterparts in Europe, and it's like, we have water on our courses. And I'm like, yeah, that's because it's not a sustainability issue there. It's just a human existence right to have potable water when you walk up and you want something to drink and you don't pay $10 for water. So I think where we hopefully follow the kind of the European, at least, and I'll stick to my lane on events, it's treating sustainability as more of a human's right, a human rights segment, and removing the label of sustainability, knowing that providing public transportation, understanding where we're hosting, the host facilities, and designating special events in a more central location for ease of access, using the infrastructure transportation-wise that's in existence, making sure that more folks can access the facility. And I get it. You can't just build a golf course in the city center. Totally get that. So let's make collaboration with, whether it's a bus, whether it's, bus is probably the best option, but let's reward folks for carpooling. Let's just engage on the wins that are possible immediately. So we no longer look at this as a sustainability topic, and we just look at it as an event way of business or a business way of business, because that's where the path is heading. I try not to use the term sustainability too much because it means something so different to everyone. And that's a good thing. It's very much a good thing, because that's what allows this bubble of sustainability to thrive. But it's also very confusing to folks who aren't in and don't know what sustainability means. So eliminate the ambiguities to sustainability, treat issues around sustainability as just simple ways of life, and not making them out to be more than they have to be.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we've talked about a lot internally at GOAT. It's this idea of we're sustainable GOAT, and we have this concept of it's focused on sustainability. But yeah, in feedback, it's like for all the different brands that we've talked to and all the listeners that have engaged with us, the concept is, well, what is sustainability at the end of the day? And that is a very, very, very confusing term. And now there's just added layers on top of it where now people are just, you throw your hands up at the end of the day and you're kind of like, well, what do I do now? What is sustainability at the end of the day? And I think that the answer to that question is different for everyone. But what you hit on, and what I think is so, so important, is that this is a human thing. If you think about the root of why the sustainability movement originally happened, it was, we have to preserve the planet because we care for the planet, because we also care for ourselves as a global community. And when you root it back to that, it's like, well, it's just about being a good human to one another. If you don't need to use as many things, why would you need to use as many things? And I think you had minimalism as a side of sustainability that I think a lot of people went into, but it oftentimes felt restrictive. But then you feel bad for consuming so much, which is true and good, but you start to have this movement now of essentialism, of only the few things you need. And I think you just see this development of what sustainability means, but you hit it that it's still just, it's human. And the human part is the coolest part. I mean, for you as a human, what is sustainability to you? Because it will be different for everybody, but what does it mean to you?
I think it means exhausting the resources to engage others. And sustainability is a very, very social topic to me. It's distilling the most important aspects of operating as a society, as a business, as an entity, as an earth, without doing more than you have to, without hindering others' ability to thrive. That's not a good answer probably to some folks, and it's a great answer to others because it's going to land totally different for other people. So I don't really know what sustainability means other than operating as efficiently as possible. And of course, that can be in a business application. That can be metaphorically in a life relationship example. It can be whatever you mean it to be, but eliminate the things that are kind of nonsensical and work within your resources, work within your means, because there are a lot of people who want to push the same rock up the same hill. And it's okay if they're a competitor. And yeah, it's okay to collaborate with people that you think may be a threat to you, because if we don't soon, everyone and everything is going to be a threat to us.
Yeah, that's so true in terms of collaboration too. I think that's so important because you have this, I don't know, it's one of the few business sectors that I've actually ever seen where direct competitors are like, hey, love what you're working on. Let's work on it together. Come on, let's grow this thing. And it's this idea of like, you kind of, everybody's the underdog right now. And it's like, if everybody wins, everybody wins. And so it's this multiple people pushing the same rock. The more that those people can get on the same page and push at the same time, it actually is going to have a bigger impact. And at the end of the day, sure, there's competition, but also if you look at sport, competition is what pushes stuff forward in a really amazing way. And I think you have this mindset traditionally that's the kind of, I'm going to win and the other person is going to lose, but why can't everybody win? And I think that's what you hit on there, was that everybody can win. Like, let's just kind of build that together. And that's one of the things I just love about this sector alone, is just that it's so collaborative, it's so community based. And I haven't met a single person that is like, nah, not that guy. And anytime they're kind of like, hey, how can I introduce you to more and more people? Because there's almost this growing energy around, well, let's do this together. And I think that's super cool. Final question for you is, where's your favorite place to enjoy nature on the whole planet? I mean, you've lived in Monterey. I lived in Monterey, and beautiful place. San Diego, Wisconsin, you travel everywhere. Where's kind of your favorite place to enjoy nature?
I would say Arizona as a state as a whole. I would say a lot of folks envision Arizona to be a desert. Well, they're wrong, because they've never been north of Sedona or north of Pine or seen the Native American reservations. I would say Arizona is incredible. Much like Southern California, you can get pretty much all 4 seasons in a day. And I think that's super underrated. The thing that I wish I had done more when I lived in Phoenix was go up to Flagstaff, go up to northern Arizona and see the different ecosystems that work in a state. And the state lines are so ambiguous and are arbitrary and why they're drawn the way they are. You know, we can guess why, but it's kind of a dumb boundary in my mind, state boundary. But to see what's encompassed in that state, it's remarkable. I mean, you've got the Grand Canyon, you've got a desert. Yeah, of course, the lakes are running dry and the rivers are running dry. But I think appreciating the state of Arizona is something I didn't do enough of when I lived there. And I just did it a few weeks ago, went to Page, Arizona, Antelope Canyon, Horseshoe Bend, and look at these works of art that the earth produced. And even me, who's not really like a super outdoorsy person, can understand and be like, holy crap, this is much bigger than I am. And it can give you a new sense of appreciation. And I just remember being in awe of all of the different outdoor engagement levels that Arizona had and its perception of what it actually isn't, but the perception that people have of Arizona.
Yeah. I mean, I remember going there for school, and you're like, oh, I'm going to live in the desert. It's going to be hot and dry, and that's it. And it's like, yeah, you can do Camelback, and that's Rocky Mountain and that kind of stuff. But you go north and you go to Flagstaff, and you're like, am I in Lake Tahoe, California? Which is incredibly desirable, right? For a lot of society. And they don't think, wow, Flagstaff can be exactly like that. And I had a friend of mine who grew up in Arizona, so he knew everything about it. And he's like, hey, let's go on this backpacking trip down to the Supai Falls. And it was like, it's so different. I mean, and you get a sense of scale, and you're like, wow, nature's incredible. And you wouldn't think that it's in the same state. And so,
Right.
yeah, I think that is an incredible answer, because most people are like, the forest, the ocean, this, and for me, it's the ocean. But Arizona, I think it's super unique in the sense of you're able to get that full picture of what it can actually look like. Because if you go to Flag, it's very different than Phoenix. It's almost like two different states.
Yeah. And the people are very different too.
Yeah, extremely. Yeah. And if anybody's driven through Sedona, that's just, a wild experience to actually see that place too. So, Alex, thank you so much for just taking the time, being on the podcast. I love what Blue Strike is doing. Love your passion behind it. I think the world needs more people like you to kind of bring this movement in a positive way. And I just think when you see that happening, you just want to hop on board. And I think that's what you very much bring to it. And yeah, just thanks for taking the time and diving deep on all things events. I think it encourages a lot of people to look at an event that they might be going to, whether it's a concert, a festival, a baseball game, golf event, whatever it is. They may look at it just a little bit differently. And I love that you were able to provide that platform, that opportunity to do that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Steve, for having me. And I appreciate the work you do with GOAT, because sometimes I get lost in the sauce and don't share what I'm doing well enough. So the opportunities like you and the platforms that you've created, engagement opportunities, they don't go unnoticed in this industry. Just like you said about the collaboration, the people who want to celebrate the work and celebrate the good, the positivity, they're equally crucial.
Awesome. Thanks. Thank you for listening to the Sustainable Goat podcast. I'm your host, Steve Cassingham. With each episode, we can further define what it means to create a truly sustainable and resilient future.
I think the new status is to show that you actually care. You want to drive change and you want to be part of a sustainable future.
People fight for what they love.
Let's really all target for a small but significant shift in the way we live, we consume, and we plan our life.
Join us at sustainablegoat.com.